Our story begins with a man the world calls a god, simply because his computer connects to a two-dimensional world. He can bestow real-world items upon them, and he finds that a simple kitchen knife he casually offers becomes their ultimate divine weapon. In return, the tiny people's offerings can enter reality, but he never expected that their very first tribute would nearly scare him to death. It all started when Leo opened a game called Pixel God, and suddenly a voice echoed within his mind. On this day, the world has finally welcomed back its great deity. Your arrival has given the world meaning once again. As he regains his senses, the scene on the computer begins to shift, revealing a flat green field surrounded by forests and rivers. In the center stands a white domed temple, and then that mysterious voice speaks once more. This is your temple, please give it a name. Since his name is Leo, he decides to call it the Temple of Leo. Just then, in the corner, two tiny, barefoot figures with bare chests appear. We see them move across the screen, wandering around the temple until one of them sprouts an exclamation mark over his head. What a magnificent house, he exclaims. Surely this was built by a god. The other little man raises both hands, declaring this a revelation from the heavens, a lucky land where they must bring more people to settle. A land promised by God. Smiley face icons float above their heads as they run off screen, only to return seconds later with 5 more followers. Now, 7 little people begin to worship around the temple. They build a small, thatched hut nearby, and from off screen, they transplant berry bushes and start a fire by the temple. A prompt appears. You have gained this century's first batch of believers. Faith is the tool through which you perform miracles. Go forth and collect more of it. In the upper right corner, a small human icon represents the population, while a palace icon next to it tracks their faith. Population and faith are both at 7. It seems one believer provides exactly 1 point of faith. Opening the faith menu, he finds a locked orb of light, representing miracles. These require a certain amount of faith to unlock, the most basic being rainfall, though there are far more powerful ones. The fire of Aegis, for instance, where a sea god imprisoned a fire dragon to create a wonder capable of spitting massive flaming boulders. Leo looks at these and falls into deep thought. This means he needs at least 10 believers to perform even a basic miracle. Increasing the population is now his top priority. Unlike other management sims, God Simulator doesn't let you build houses or produce citizens directly. You can only wait for the pixel people. They must reproduce or gather on their own while we watch these pixel people farm. Just then, he notices the little people around the temple acting strangely. Sad expressions float above their heads as they huddle around the temple in prayer. Great God, they cry, please show us your power and grant us your blessing. The forest tribe believes we worship a demon and they want to tear down your temple. Please, great God, show us a miracle to protect us. Leo realizes this is their first major crisis, but with only 7 points of faith, he can't even make it rain. To be honest, things look grim. He continues exploring until his mouse clicks on the temple, opening a new interface. In the center is a stone bonfire with a gray humanoid statue standing before it. The statue's features are blurred, a vague image of a deity imagined by the pixel people. In front of this statue sits a long, familiar-looking table. The table has 2 slots, a large one on the left labeled Tribute, and a smaller one on the right labeled Boon. Currently, both are completely empty. Tributes are easy enough to understand, so boons must be the powers or items a god grants to believers. Perhaps this is the miracle they need. But then, Leo notices something incredibly strange. That long table looks familiar. In fact, it looks exactly like his own computer desk back in reality. The tribute slot is the rectangular shape of a keyboard, while the boon slot is an oval. Could it be a mouse? Looking closer, he realizes something else. The statue being worshipped looks just like him. This realization gives him quite a shock, but a bold, almost crazy idea begins to take root. Carefully, he places a clove of garlic from his desk onto his computer mouse and waits with bated breath. 2 seconds later, the garlic simply rolls off. It was just a coincidence, he tells himself with a self-deprecating laugh. But at that exact moment, the fallen garlic suddenly vanishes into thin air. He looks at the screen and sees a pixel icon of garlic appearing in the temple's boon slot. Clicking it reveals a short description of the item. A divine boon, a special spice that also serves as a medicinal herb. Would you like to bestow this garlic upon your followers? Leo begins to tremble. He runs a lap around his rental room and splashes cold water on his face to wake up. When he returns to the desk, the garlic is still there. This confirms it. The garlic in his hand was actually sent into the temple through the position of his mouse. It's an impossible bridge between worlds. He has no idea how this game manages to break the fourth wall so literally, but he is dying to see how the 2 worlds will interact. He clicks confirm, and immediately, exclamation marks pop up over the heads of the defeated-looking little people surrounding the temple. The god has appeared. A miracle has descended. Great God, they shout in joy. We thank you for your divine gift of the great garlic. After receiving the divine garlic, the little people bow in prayer and spread the news, their sad expressions replaced by joyful smiles. They busily set to work, clearing a patch of farmland where tiny sprouts soon emerge and turn into a vibrant green field. A notification appears. Your boon has taught the believers how to plant and use garlic, and their faith has increased accordingly. The faith points in the corner jump from 7 to 22, proving that divine gifts are a quick way to harvest devotion. Leo spots a pencil on his desk, thinking tools would be vital for a tribe, but the boon slot still shows the garlic icon. A prompt explains that the garlic is still integrating into the world, so he must wait, a fair rule for a game he just started. About half an hour later, a group of little people wearing leather vests rushes onto the screen, led by a warrior in a horned helmet. Armed with wooden spears and torches, they surround the temple, shouting that this demon hut must be torn down immediately. They call the temple's residents followers of a demon and demand that everything be burned to the ground. This is the forest tribe the believers mentioned, who truly believe a demon resides in the temple. The 7 believers are terrified. Exclamation marks pop up over the believers' heads as they protest, insisting this is a sacred palace where the god has granted miracles. They point to the great garlic as proof, but the forest tribe refuses to listen and prepares to set the temple on fire. Leo opens the miracles menu and hovers over the first option, thinking a sudden rainstorm might be seen as divine anger by these primitives. But then he changes his mind. If he's going to act, he needs something more impactful. He looks further down the list of miracles. The costs vary. Rain is 10, lightning is 20, scorching sun is 25, hurricane is 30, and earthquake is 40. He only has 22 points. He locks onto the lightning miracle. As he selects it, his mouse cursor transforms into a targeting icon with a draggable area of effect. He shrinks the range until it is locked directly onto the head of the forest tribe's leader. The tall poppy, it seems, is about to be cut down. With a gentle click of the mouse, he unleashes a bolt of heavenly thunder. A flash of lightning streaks across the pixelated sky. The bolt strikes the leader, turning him and 2 nearby warriors into piles of ash. The rest of the forest tribe flees in absolute terror. Only the 7 believers remain, their icons now showing righteous anger as they shout that the attackers have finally provoked the god. Leo watched the fate of the blasphemers with a sense of grim satisfaction. To be honest, being worshipped as a god felt rather good. He relaxed, noticing a slight ache in his neck, as this simple game had a strange, addictive quality that kept him playing until midnight. Reluctantly, he shut down the computer to get some sleep before work, but as he lay in bed, a curious thought drifted through his mind. If he could summon disasters and bestow real-world items upon these pixelated people, then in their eyes, he truly was a god. The next day, the moment he finished work, Leo hurried home to open the God Simulator and was greeted by the familiar loading screen. He breathed a sigh of relief that his save file was intact, but the scene on the screen caught him completely by surprise. 5 thatched huts now stood near the temple, each with its own garlic field, and the population had surged from 7 to 30. After yesterday's lightning strike, he had only 2 faith points left, but now that number had climbed to 25. The increase of 23 points matched the new arrivals, confirming his theory. Each new follower provides exactly 1 point of faith. More importantly, the game world continued to evolve even while the computer was off and a new prompt appeared on the screen. It informed him that his followers were now numerous enough to form a tribe and asked him to provide a name for them. He casually typed in Garlic Tribe, figuring that since their entire culture revolved around his gift, the name was perfectly logical. With the tribe officially established, the temple's fame began to spread to distant lands, and Leo turned his attention to the newcomers. These 23 new pixel people wore leather vests, looking quite different from the original 7 shirtless locals. They were members of the forest tribe who had decided to defect and settle here after witnessing the divine display the night before. His lightning bolt diplomacy had worked wonders. Whether driven by fear or awe, they were now firmly under his influence. With more hands available, a simple division of labor emerged, and the little people began hunting in the woods and gathering berries. One was even trying his hand at fishing by the river, though the tribe was still very much in a primitive struggle for survival. Leo checked the boon slot and saw the garlic was still on cooldown. It seemed the wait for the next divine gift would be long. He told himself that next time he might send wheat to solve the food shortage, or perhaps a bow to jumpstart their technology. Hunting was becoming easier, and with their new numbers, they finally had the means to resist any threats from the forest tribe. Their capabilities were growing, but then a new text prompt appeared that made Leo freeze in his tracks. The Garlic tribe was offering a baby as a sacrifice to their god. Leo's face twitched at the thought of such a grim ritual. It certainly fit the historical habits of primitive humans, but a prompt appeared asking if he would accept this living sacrifice. He decisively clicked no, realizing that if a baby suddenly appeared in his apartment, he'd have no way to explain it to anyone. The police would be at his door in minutes, and the thought of the cost for formula and diapers was even more terrifying. He told himself he was a god, not a tribal daycare worker, and as he rejected the offering, exclamation marks popped up everywhere. The pixel people panicked, crying out that the god was displeased and clearly didn't want babies. Some suggested adults who could work. Others argued that they should offer the best prey instead, certain that their god would surely prefer a wild boar. Some thought fish was the answer, and as they scrambled for new offerings, Leo found their frantic dialogue quite amusing. He mused that if they sent wild game, he might actually have a nice midnight snack. Soon, almost the entire tribe headed for the woods. They searched the forests and mountains for a suitable gift, but Leo's attention was drawn to one very different pixel man. This was one of his original followers, standing shirtless outside the temple and staring at the sky with a question mark over his head. When Leo hovered his mouse over the icon, a thought bubble appeared, revealing the man's deep internal struggle. The man wondered what a god could truly need. If he didn't want babies, perhaps he didn't need more labor at all. He reasoned that a god who bestowed magical garlic must live in a world where food was never a concern. After seeing the forest tribe struck down by divine lightning, he was certain their god possessed unimaginable power. To such a being, their ordinary possessions were meaningless. Only something truly mysterious might be worthy. Suddenly, the question mark turned into a bright light bulb as the little man seemed to reach a profound realization. He ran into the dense forest, leaving Leo surprised by a pixel person whose intellect clearly far surpassed those around him. Having awakened his wisdom, the little man soon emerged from the forest, carrying an item into the temple that appeared in the sacrifice slot. The icon looked like a short staff polished from a tree branch, and a text prompt identified it as the Vigor Staff. It restored 1 point of energy and faith per hour. Apparently, this was a treasure crafted by the fallen forest god. It drew life force from nature, allowing the holder to extract vitality upon touch, a relic lost after the forest god's demise. The game asked if he would accept the Vigor Staff. As soon as Leo clicked yes, the icon vanished from the screen. Suddenly, a forearm-length staff materialized right on top of his black computer keyboard, making his palms sweat with anticipation. Even though he had expected something like this might happen, the reality of it was still quite a shock. He held his breath and picked it up carefully. It wasn't heavy, weighing about the same as a normal piece of wood. The surface was covered in wood grain but felt smooth and delicate, as if coated in a layer of transparent lacquer. The top had 2 short prongs like a broken clothes pole, yet tiny green buds grew there, giving it a sense of lingering life. As he held the staff, Leo felt a sudden jolt of energy. His back pain vanished, and he felt as refreshed as a teenager. It seemed the magical items from the pixel world worked in reality too, as a line of text appeared. Maximum vigor duration, 12 hours. This meant that, theoretically, he would never need to sleep again as long as he held this staff, a dream for any office worker. He wouldn't even drowse off at work the next day. He waved the staff in excitement for a moment before finally calming down. The real point wasn't just the energy, but the fact that items could actually be brought out of the pixel world into his own. If the temple could act as a gateway for more magical tools, then this game was nothing less than an endless treasure trove. With this ability to break the fourth wall, he told himself it wouldn't be long before he could leave his grueling job behind forever. We returned to the game, where the pixel people were heading back to the tribe with smiling faces, celebrating the god's approval. They were overjoyed that the god liked the gift, and many vowed to find even better treasures to please their deity. Others still insisted a wild boar was the superior choice, arguing it was far more impressive than a mere tree branch. The villagers who favored the wild boar and the fish both belonged to the forest tribe, wearing leather vests and focusing their lives on gathering and hunting. To them, prey was the ultimate gift, which is understandable. Leo scanned the crowd, trying to find the specific pixel person who had discovered the Vigor Staff, but since they all looked identical without names or unique features, identification was difficult. After a thorough search, he finally spotted him in the temple, shirtless, barefoot, and still bearing a question mark. A new message flickered on the screen. A believer has awakened wisdom. Would you like to convert him into a prophet? In many ancient cultures, a prophet is one inspired by the divine to convey God's will. This little pixel man who found the staff certainly fit the bill. Deep down, Leo knew he needed someone in this pixel world who could actually understand his intentions, even if only partially, rather than letting a confused mob guess blindly. He certainly didn't want any more babies appearing in the sacrifice slot, so he clicked yes. And so, the Garlic tribe gained its very first prophet. Under his guidance and influence, the intelligence of all the villagers began to slightly increase. The prophet knelt and worshipped before the statue, then stepped outside, where the other pixel people immediately swarmed him, sensing that he had received a divine blessing. The prophet spoke, explaining that the offerings the deity required were magical items beyond their ordinary understanding. He urged them to keep a watchful eye out for such things to offer to their god, promising that doing so would bring divine favor. The prophet is right, they cheered. Listen to him. Let's find magical items. A magical wild boar? I know of a white magical boar that no one has ever caught, and I've seen a magical fish in the water that devours flesh and bone. It's very mysterious. Surely the god would love it. Leo watched the last 2 speakers with a silent sigh. Naturally, they were both wearing leather vests, even without names or markers. He recognized them instantly as the same stubborn brothers from before. Their obsession with pigs and fish was as conspicuous as fireflies in the night. Although the prophet had described the desired offerings, the next 3 hours passed without any of the pixel people making a similar discovery. Most returned to their daily routines, planting garlic and berries, then eating them. Soon after, the tribe welcomed 2 new infants. As the villagers diverted their hands to childcare, the only person Leo could directly guide was the prophet. Leo moved him to a designated spot, leaving it up to the man's own intuition to see what he might discover. By the time he finished observing, it was already 6:30. In the evening, feeling hungry, he headed downstairs to a small diner for some shredded pork fried rice. After devouring his meal, he hurried back to find that the garlic tribe had undergone a sudden change. A black bear had wandered into the village from nowhere, destroying 2 farmlands and a house. On the ground lay the bodies of 2 pixel people. Most of the villagers were hiding behind the temple, trembling in fear, while the prophet stood by the entrance, shielding the tribes. 2 small infants. Suddenly, we notice something unusual. 2 pixel people are actually confronting the black bear. They are wearing leather vests and wielding wooden clubs, circling the bear from front and back. They strike at its head and hindquarters, shouting as they move. If they aren't careful, they'll be crushed just like the horned helmet leader from before. Leo knew he had to keep them at a distance. The tribe's population simply couldn't afford any more losses, and so he decided to watch closely. The 2 pixel men were surprisingly agile, coordinating their strikes. One would hit and run while the other attacked, forcing the bear to face enemies on both sides. Though their wooden clubs didn't deal much damage, it became clear they were trying to lure the bear away to protect the others. These 2 brothers usually seemed a bit unreliable, but in a crisis, they were truly brave. Leo immediately selected his lightning skill, predicting the bear's path toward the forest to ensure the strike stayed as far from the brothers as possible. A silver bolt of lightning crashed down, striking the bear directly in the head and killing it instantly. The 2 brothers were knocked to the ground by the shock, but after a few seconds, they scrambled back up. They were still alive. Leo breathed a sigh of relief as he watched the pixel people raise their arms in celebration, smiley faces floating above their heads. Where did this beast come from, and why did it attack the garlic tribe so suddenly? A moment later, the prophet handed the children to a nearby villager and walked toward the bear's charred corpse. An exclamation mark lit up above the prophet's head as a prompt appeared. The bear's body shuddered and transformed into a dead pixel person. The villagers panicked instantly. It was a follower of a demon. A follower of a demon turned into a bear to destroy our temple and attack us. These man-eating demons are terrifying, and there is a demon among us. I must leave. 3 of the pixel people immediately fled in all directions, and the population dropped to 25. Faith also dropped by 3 points. Factoring in the 20 points spent on lightning, Leo was left with only 7 points of faith. He scratched his head in frustration. After a long day of hard work, he was back to square one. Being a god, it seemed, was no easy task, but what truly caught his attention was this new demonic element. It appeared that demons and gods were on opposing sides, and the tribe had barely been established before a cultist attacked. He wondered if this was a random event or if they were being watched, but future encounters with demons seemed inevitable. The prophet then found a letter on the cultist's body. It explained they had the wrong place. They mistook the garlic tribe for the forest tribe. Their real target was elsewhere, so for now, the village was safe. The other terrified pixel people finally calmed down and began repairing the destroyed houses and farmlands. Leo opened the temple interface. The garlic in the blessing slot hadn't disappeared yet, which meant he still couldn't provide remote support, and the villagers hadn't brought any new offerings. However, to his surprise, 2 more pixel people entered the temple. Great God, 2 of your followers have performed a feat far beyond their peers. Would you like to transform them into heroes? Without a moment's hesitation, Leo clicked yes. The 2 pixel people were enveloped in a white light, and a new title appeared above their heads. Hero. Naturally, it was the 2 brothers. Much like the prophet, these heroes could now be guided and controlled. Leo selected specific areas for the 2 heroes to explore and patrol. While the prophet was a thinker, the heroes were far better suited for exploration and field reconnaissance. By clicking on the brothers repeatedly, a detailed character interface appeared, showing pixel portraits of the 2 male heroes. The one who liked pigs was muscular, while the one who liked fish looked lean and agile. They both wore the same leather vests without any other equipment. It turned out one had been a hunter and the other a fisherman, though their stats were a bit underwhelming. Still, since they were heroes awakened from ordinary pixel people, he couldn't ask for too much. He then opened the prophet's menu. We see the prophet, Jacob, standing shirtless and gazing at the sky. His status is listed as a farmer, and aside from a knowledge stat of 13, his other attributes are all 0. Fortunately, the prophet possesses a special ability, wisdom. This is the key for apostles to listen to the divine will of their God. The higher the level of wisdom, the easier it is to improve and comprehend various skills. Leo hovered his mouse over the 6 attributes, and the screen displayed the function of each stat. Attack, defense, knowledge, and the rest felt very similar to the mechanics of the Heroes of Might and Magic series. It seems that in the future, both the prophet and the heroes will be able to lead soldiers into battle. But for now, the garlic tribe's population is sparse, and production is in its early primitive stages. They have no farm tools, let alone the technology to craft weapons. To produce professional soldiers, there is still a long road ahead. So, Leo selected the 2 brothers and sent them into the forest to explore together. He would have to rely on these 2 lone heroes for now, hoping they might find some good fortune. A few minutes later, they actually found something They discovered the settlement of the forest tribe and were warmly received. An exclamation mark appeared over the head of one of the forest tribe members. They wanted to trade leather and meat for the tribe's garlic. The two brothers returned to the village to meet with the prophet and relay the forest tribe's request. The prophet fell into deep thought. Leo was also a bit conflicted about whether to tell the forest tribe about the black bear demon. The garlic tribe is still weak. Trading now might attract the attention of demon cultists. Yet, this was also an opportunity to reach the outside world, allowing them to trade for much-needed leather and meat while building a good relationship. After some thought, Leo selected the prophet and moved him directly into the forest. After all, development is the only way forward. To avoid being bullied, the tribe must seize every chance to grow rapidly. Otherwise, once the forest tribe is wiped out, the cultists will simply turn their sights on the garlic tribe. He couldn't miss this chance. An exclamation mark appeared over the prophet's head as he realized he had somehow arrived in the forest. To him, it seemed, this was the divine will. His god clearly believed they should unite with the forest tribe, and so he would do just that. The prophet then entered the woods. A small figure in a leather vest stepped out from the camp. A small path had been cleared through the forest, leading deep into another settlement. On the computer screen, the boundaries of what Leo could observe expanded further outward. From his godlike perspective, he could see clearly that the forest tribe numbered over 100 people. They lived in various tree houses, a far cry from the struggling garlic tribe. Unlike our small group, the forest tribe has two distinct professions: farmers who grow berries and mushrooms to trade for other food, and hunters who use traps and wooden spears to catch birds and rabbits, trading their catch and crafting leather from pelts. While the farmers stay behind to tend the berry bushes and mushroom patches, the hunters venture deep into the woods and mountains. The leader of the forest tribe is a shaman wearing a wooden mask. He and Jacob, our prophet, began a long conversation. Strangely, their dialogue didn't appear on the screen. It was as if they were in a private chat that even Leo couldn't see. Fortunately, 10 minutes later, several notifications popped up. The prophet warned them about the demon cultists and their attitude shifted to friendly. Then, the prophet taught them how to grow and use garlic, and the forest tribe's attitude became intimate. The gift was finally complete. Garlic had officially integrated into this world, and the two tribes formed an alliance. With the alliance successful, Leo's faith would now begin to spread throughout the forest tribe. Seeing this string of good news, Leo felt a sense of relief. Jacob's efforts had certainly paid off. With over 100 new people, there was finally a chance to gain more followers, a much-needed source of faith. This alliance also gave the garlic tribe a reliable trading partner. Most importantly, since the gift was complete, Leo checked the temple interface. Sure enough, the gift slot was empty, meaning he could now send another item through. He was excited for a moment, but then fell into deep thought. What did the garlic tribe need most right now? Writing tools, equipment, food. He toyed with the energy staff in his hand as various ideas surfaced. Every option seemed useful in its own way. Just as he was struggling to choose, a new line of text appeared. The forest tribe, to show their gratitude for the garlic, had offered a sacrifice. Leo was delighted. The second sacrifice had arrived. He opened the temple's sacrifice slot to find a green plant shaped like a cactus. It was a cactus retainer, a loyal servant of the gods that restores 1 point of obedience per hour. These creatures follow divine orders and handle the cleaning and offerings within the temple. To be honest, they are quite handy. They are a group of reliable, hardworking spirits who usually stay in cactus form while in the presence of their god. Intrigued by the idea of a living servant, Leo quickly withdrew the sacrifice, and in the blink of an eye, a round cactus appeared on his keyboard. It was the size of a fist, looking exactly like any ordinary store-bought plant. But then, the plump green sphere began to wobble, sprouting slender green arms and legs. It bent its tiny knees, pressing its round body against the desk to offer a solemn bow. Leo wondered if it could actually clean. The cactus retainer, still kneeling, gave a firm nod. He told it to clean the floor, and upon receiving the order, it leaped from the table, landing with an elegant grace before dashing across the room. Wherever it ran, dust and hair were swept up, sticking to its body and compressing into small balls. It was like a tiny biological vacuum cleaner. Soon, the floor was spotless. Even the crumbs and years of grime hidden in the cracks were pulled out, leaving the cracked old stone tiles gleaming like a polished mirror. Leo kicked back with a soda, watching the cactus work. He felt a strange sense of contentment. This, he realized, was the joy of being a god. Work, however, was less pleasant. While he had managed to sneak out early yesterday, today the entire office was forced into overtime. The boss was furious, demanding a full work summary from everyone before they could leave. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere hung over the office. As long as the boss stayed, no one dared to move. During the wait, his colleague Sarah handed him a wafer. He thanked her, feeling the hunger set in. Sarah was one of the few people who actually did real work there. She was kind and easy to get along with, often looking out for Leo, but his mind was entirely on the simulator. When the boss finally left, Sarah offered him a ride home, but Leo politely declined, eager to get back to his game. Sarah warned him to stay safe, mentioning a disturbing local story about a maniac who knocks people unconscious and hangs them up with ropes. Leo had heard of it. A student and a delivery man were already in therapy because of it. She asked if he still lived in the Nanyuan district. He nodded, but his only thought was getting home to the simulator. He sprinted back to his small apartment, ready to see how his garlic tribe was faring in his absence. Back at his desk, the cactus retainer immediately knelt in greeting. Leo noticed his small apartment had been completely transformed. The bedsheets and curtains looked several shades brighter. Every speck of dust had been sucked away, and the wardrobe and bedside table were polished until they practically glowed. A faint, fresh scent of greenery filled the air. Interestingly, the only things the cactus hadn't touched were the computer and the desk to the little creature. These seemed to be sacred, inviolable domains that only a god should touch. The 24-inch monitor flickered with a soft white light. Knowing the simulator ran on its own, Leo had simply stopped turning the machine off, letting the world within stay active at all times. As we return to the screen, we see the garlic tribe has changed again. The population has reached 38, including 3 newcomers, some wearing leather vests from the forest tribes, and others who appeared to be barefoot wanderers. There was even a wild-looking man, clad in nothing but tree leaves. His faith points had risen to 44, enough for 2 more lightning strikes. Between the cactus retainer and the spirit palm, he was earning a fixed income of 2 faith points per hour, while the growing population provided a nice floating bonus. Now, it was time for the main event. Leo opened his bag and pulled out a transparent plastic pouch filled with light brown seeds, wheat seeds. This was a calculated move. He believed that once the garlic tribe was well fed, they would have the energy to develop culture, writing, and even weapons. With a steady food supply, higher needs, and the drive to think would naturally follow. A prompt appeared on the screen. Do you wish to bestow wheat upon your followers? A moment later, outside the temple, exclamation marks popped up over the heads of the tiny pixel people. They raised their arms in a frantic cheer. A miracle. Long live the great god. Thank you for your divine gift. Wheat, miraculous wheat, delicious food. Let us feast. The god has given us wheat, and we must make the most of it so that the faith of our god can spread further into the world. The prophet, being the tribe's only intellectual, clearly had a vision for the future. Suddenly, the faith points jumped from 44 to 84. While the garlic had added 15 points, the wheat brought in 40. It seemed that gifts had varying levels of impact, and for now, food was clearly the most influential factor for the garlic tribe's growth. A short while later, the prophet entered the temple to pray. A question mark appeared over his head, and Leo clicked to see his concern. Great God, the forest tribe knows of a frozen apostle of the Savior God and wishes to offer her to you. However, they want us to teach them about wheat in exchange. But wheat is so precious that my humble wisdom cannot measure its worth. I can only devoutly beg the Almighty God for a sign. A prompt appeared on the screen. Do you wish to share wheat with the forest tribe in exchange for the apostle? The simulator didn't provide a detailed description of this pixel world, nor did it offer a full map or data. As a god, Leo had to explore step by step. When the black bear attacked, he initially thought it was just a wild beast. It was only after the prophet examined the corpse that they identified it as a demon believer. In a way, Leo didn't know much more than these pixel people. He simply possessed the identity of a player, an outsider god. It occurred to him that if an outsider god like himself existed, there were likely local gods in this world too. He looked at the spirit palm in his hand and the dormant cactus retainer. Both treasures originally belonged to the forest god. The temple records showed the forest god had fallen, which is why his relics had ended up in the mortal world. Was a deity like the forest god the same as this savior god? Unfortunately, there was no one to answer that question for him. After a moment's thought, Leo decided to make the trade. Wheat was valuable, but the garlic tribe couldn't monopolize it forever. It was better to make a fair trade now than be exploited later. A light bulb appeared over the prophet's head. Great God, your servant knows what to do. He immediately began negotiating with the shaman. They reached an agreement quickly, and smiley faces popped up over the forest tribe's heads. They praised the great god for his gift of food. Then, the forest tribe carried a stone coffin out of the woods, delivering it to the garlic tribe's temple. A gray stone coffin icon labeled Apostle appeared on the temple interface. Leo clicked the icon, and a detailed illustration appeared. Inside the gray coffin lay a woman with her eyes blindfolded. Fine cracks lined her cheeks, and her body seemed encased in ash, her stony shell merging with the coffin itself. She was so integrated with the stone that, if not for the faint softness of her youthful face, she would be indistinguishable from a statue. This was a frozen apostle of the forest god, a being meant to carry out a deity's will and follow their every command. She was a vessel designed to listen to the divine voice and allow a god to descend into the world. According to the description, an apostle seemed to be a unit that a player god could control directly. However, waking her would be no simple task. Leo clicked on her and received a prompt to restore the apostle and convert her into a servant of his own temple. He would need to expend a massive amount of faith. The screen asked if he wished to spend 500 points to begin the conversion. Considering a lightning bolt cost only 20 points, this apostle was worth 25 strikes. To be honest, that was a staggering price. He simply couldn't afford such an expense yet, so he set the matter aside to focus on development. He couldn't help but wonder about her. This apostle served the forest god. The prophet's staff was found in the forest, and the cactus retainer also originated from that same deity. Now, a frozen apostle had been unearthed near the temple. It seemed this entire region was deeply tied to the fallen forest god. Unfortunately, he couldn't interview the pixel people or ask questions, so he turned his attention back to the tribe's construction. He assigned the two brothers to new tasks, one to the river and one to the forest. One was a fisherman and the other a hunter. The two heroes soon provided feedback. The best fishing spots were in deep water, meaning the tribe would need to build boats. In the forest, medicinal herbs were found with animal bite marks and bloodstains on them, but their properties remained a mystery. They needed a pharmacist to identify them. The resources were there, but the professional talent was missing. He knew he couldn't rush things. He decided to relax and watch. He found 2 frozen ears of corn in his fridge and boiled them for dinner. While eating the warm, soft corn, he watched as the seasons shifted within the pixelated world on his screen. Winter had arrived. Aside from the two heroes, the pixel people of the garlic tribe retreated to their homes to keep warm. During the short daylight hours, they gathered branches for firewood and cleared snow from the temple and the fields. Fortunately, the wheat had been planted early. With a bountiful harvest in storage, the little people weren't afraid of the cold at all. Above their heads, happy emojis floated constantly. With wheat in storage and plenty of food, no one would starve this winter. They were grateful for the divine gifts of wheat and garlic. Just then, the forest tribe paid a sudden visit, but this wasn't for trade. The shaman led the group personally. Our prophet welcomed them, lighting a bonfire amidst the snowdrifts to warm their allies. The shaman, however, had an anxious expression. He pleaded, "Friends of the garlic tribe, we have encountered a crisis we cannot solve. We beg for your help." 20 of the forest tribe's best hunters had ventured deep into the woods for one last hunt to prepare for the long winter. But a massive avalanche on the mountain buried them somewhere in the northern forest. "We cannot find them," the shaman cried. "Only the power of a god can save them. We pray to the all-powerful god of the temple to show mercy to these hunters." He promised that if the hunters were saved, the forest tribe would build a temple in their own village to honor Leo's divinity. They would offer sacrifices and pledge the eternal loyalty of their entire tribe. To be honest, it was a tempting offer. The prophet told them that if they sought divine protection, they must worship at the temple. Only the most sincere prayers could earn a god's mercy. The shaman and his people began to pray fervently around the temple. Meanwhile, Leo considered the situation. If he could find those men, he could establish a second temple in the forest tribe. This meant he could bless 2 tribes at once, doubling his offerings. But how could he save hunters buried under deep snow? He remembered the blazing sun miracle in his menu. It cost 25 faith points and, once activated, should be able to melt the snow. He selected the miracle and moved his cursor to the northernmost reaches of the forest, expanding the area of effect as much as possible before clicking. High above the northern woods, a brilliant golden light appeared. The thick white snow quickly vanished, revealing many tiny pixel people shivering on the ground. An exclamation mark popped up over the kneeling shaman's head. "Great God, the forest tribe is deeply grateful for your mercy. We believe in your great power without a doubt. We shall build a temple to worship you immediately." The shaman sent a group of villagers racing toward the cleared northern forest, and they soon recovered all the missing hunters. True to the shaman's word, the forest tribe constructed a new temple. However, Leo felt a slight twinge of disappointment because the interface didn't change at all. His plan to double the blessings and offerings hadn't come true, but there was still a gain. The forest tribe's attitude had shifted to one of pure worship. Because they now served the same deity, the forest tribe was beginning to merge with the garlic tribe. Leo felt a surge of excitement. If he could integrate over 100 people, it would be a massive upgrade. It meant hundreds of faith points, a population boost, and an expansion of the temple's influence, providing more manpower to trigger more random events. This short-term expenditure of faith was clearly a long-term investment. As we look closer, we see that the forest tribe previously had no real religious beliefs, no temples, and no totems. Their shaman didn't even show the same divine dependence as the prophet. He acted more like a seasoned elder, guiding the tribe through ancestral experience. To be honest, this was a stroke of luck for Leo. If they had worshipped another god, a conflict of faith might have occurred, and the tribes might have even gone to war. Now, a wider road had been cleared between the two settlements, with houses appearing along the path. There were the garlic tribe's huts and the forest tribe's treehouses side by side. The two groups were growing closer, and Leo waited for their complete unification. Suddenly, a ringing sound drifted in from outside. We return to the real world, where Leo lives in an old neighborhood. The alleys are empty by day and even quieter at night. He walked to the window and looked out, seeing something swaying back and forth under the streetlight, as if something were hanging from the pole. On closer inspection, a person was suspended by a rope from the concrete post. The phone's ringing was hauntingly clear in the alley. He immediately dialed the police, saying, "Hello? There is someone hanging from a rope in the alleyway. I am at the motorcycle factory dormitory in the 9 Springs community. Please come quickly." The police asked for the detailed address and situation, telling him not to do anything reckless as they were on their way. Setting down his phone, he breathed a sigh of relief. Such matters were best left to the professionals. At that moment, his dormant cactus follower suddenly hopped onto the windowsill. It faced the person in the alley, its needles tensed as if it were on high. Alert, did you find something? Leo asked. The cactus follower nodded. Ah, it's a pity you can't speak. Great God of the screen, if you say a follower can speak, then they shall. The cactus knelt and a voice emerged. A voice with a strange accent spoke, and Leo was startled. You can speak? Only because you allowed it, great God, the humble follower replied. The cactus then turned its attention back to the person hanging in the alleyway, its needles bristling with a sense of dread. It spoke of cruel and extreme rituals used to gather faith, preying on fear and ignorance to manipulate believers. A demon, it whispered, a demon. When Leo asked what the difference was between a god and a demon, the follower explained that a demon is simply an evil god from the other side. Leo realized that a demon was just another name for a rival player. It seemed he wasn't the only one using a god simulator to collect offerings. He suddenly remembered what Sarah had mentioned about a pervert lurking in the Nine Springs community. Deep down, he felt a chill of realization. He warned himself to be more cautious. He couldn't let anyone discover the simulator on his computer. If a demon player found out, they would surely try to seize his magical items or even launch a direct attack against him. To be honest, that was a terrifying prospect. This was no longer just a game. He found a small flower pot and told the cactus follower that without his permission, it must remain still. You cannot move or speak. You are just an ordinary cactus sitting here. Do you understand? He commanded firmly. Yes, great God, the cactus follower replied, bowing before becoming still. Meanwhile, the phone in the alley continued its haunting, repetitive ring. It sounded like a desperate cry for help. Leo looked back at the lamppost. The hanging figure had stopped struggling, as if exhausted. The person's features became clearer under the harsh light. He was wearing a black hoodie, and his skin appeared to be stained with blood. Remembering he had a pair of binoculars, Leo grabbed them to get a better look. With the added magnification, the scene became tragically vivid. To his shock, he recognized the person. It was a stylist from the Benchmark Cuts barbershop across the street, a man known as Andy. His real name was unknown, but because the shop was affordable, only $15 a haircut, Leo went there often and remembered him well. Andy had dyed his hair a pale blonde and looked to be in his early 20s. He was usually a very soft-spoken young man. He was always polite, almost timid, which made the sight of him hanging there all the more disturbing and surreal. The silence of the night felt heavy as Leo tried to process the connection between his game and this grim reality. He looked back at the cactus in the pot on his desk. Have you been to our world before? He asked quietly. The cactus replied that this was its first time in his divine realm, having been given life by the forest god. However, the realm where the forest god resided seemed quite different from Leo's world. Apparently, it was filled with water. The creature felt too small to comprehend such a vast existence, and we see it struggling to describe its former master. It explained that gods cannot be looked upon directly, and their true forms are as indescribable as Leo's own presence. It could only catch glimpses of the shadows gods cast, and from these fragments, Leo managed to pry more information. The cactus had no name, being just one of many servants created to perform menial tasks within the forest god's temple. Once the forest god sent these followers into the pixel world, he never called them back to his side again. The follower only knew that the temple eventually fell into ruin, signaling that the forest god had finally perished. Centuries later, it was dug up by the forest tribe while they were searching for mushrooms. To be honest, that's quite a long nap. It turned out that only a true god could restore the cactus to its real form. Pixel life alone wasn't enough. Since it was a relic left behind by the forest god, Leo decided it needed a proper name to mark its new life. He decided to call it Spike. The next day at the office, as the workday neared its end, rumors began to swirl. The pervert had appeared again in the Nine Springs community, and Sarah reminded Leo how lucky he was to have avoided him. To show his gratitude for her warning, Leo ordered her a small cake and a coffee through a delivery app. After work, he hopped on a shared electric scooter and sped off, taking shortcuts to avoid the heavy evening traffic. Returning home, he sat eagerly before his computer. In the pixel world, winter had passed, and the snow had vanished. In its place were fresh sprouts and green grass, as the people of the great mulberry tribe began clearing more land. The little figures seemed happy. We see Sam and another villager chatting outside the temple, frequently popping up smiley faces. The forest tribe had once been followers of the forest god, though that was now just a story passed down by elders. It was said to be a tale from a previous era, and the old ones claimed the forest god hadn't truly disappeared. Before the forest god vanished, this forest covered more than half the world, and in those days, every wild beast was a friend. The forest tribe lived in harmony with nature, and even the most ferocious demons were tamed into humble servants. Every person enjoyed a long life, existing in symbiosis with the ancient trees. Yes, it was a golden age of sorts. They possessed power bestowed by the gods, but those days are now a distant memory, fading into the mists of time. It has been so long that we can no longer be certain what is truth and what is merely legend. To be honest, time has a way of blurring things. Since the time of the previous shaman, the forest tribe has faced chronic food shortages as the winters grew increasingly harsh. With fewer animals to hunt, the shadows of demon followers began to prowl the woods. This forest was slowly withering away. The shaman told Spike that he had a difficult decision to make. They wanted to move out of the forest to serve Leo's temple. He asked if the great god Leo would accept them. An exclamation mark appeared over Spike's head, followed by a bright light bulb. Spike replied that any devout believer would receive Leo's protection and that the Garlic tribe would welcome them with open arms. A prompt appeared on the screen. The Garlic tribe and the Forest tribe were merging. We see his faith points beginning to rise. The blessing was complete, and the wheat was fully integrated into the world. Leo quickly glanced at the top right corner of his screen. His faith points jumped from 79 to 237, and the population grew from 38 to 196. He couldn't help but pump his fist in the air. All of his early investment and patient waiting had finally paid off. After the formal merger, the Forest tribe began their relocation. They started building huts and clearing land just like the Garlic tribe, learning how to plant wheat and garlic alongside their new neighbors. Meanwhile, the hunters of the Forest tribe continued to venture into the woods to bring back much-needed meat and leather. Gradually, the original members of the Garlic tribe began wearing leather vests too. It was a practical fashion choice, really. Visually, it was now impossible to distinguish between the two groups. The new Garlic tribe was thriving, but two brothers soon ran into trouble. Without realizing it, they had wandered into the furthest reaches of the western forest, where the trees met the rolling mountains. Suddenly, they shouted a warning and ran back toward the village. There were enemies in the forest, and an attack was imminent. The discovery made by the two heroes set the entire tribe into motion as hunters grabbed their wooden spears under the leadership of Spike and the shaman. They stood ready for battle, and soon the enemies in the western forest revealed themselves, a group of savages clad in animal skins, wielding heavy stone axes. There were only about a dozen of them, but they were fierce enough to hold their own against over 30 hunters. The savages demanded food, threatening to kill everyone if they didn't comply. Our hunters found these brutes difficult to handle, but fortunately, the two heroes showed their true worth. They gripped their wooden clubs and specialized in sneaking behind the savages to deliver heavy blows, using their natural agility to avoid taking any damage. This simple yet effective combat style left the savages reeling, and they were soon forced to retreat. At first, they retreated with curses, shouting that the tribe was doomed and that they would return to slit their throats. Leo watched this with a bit of regret, wishing they had finished off these bandits instead of just driving them away. It was then that the shaman spoke up about the barbarian tribe. They lived up in the mountains, lacking wisdom and behaving more like wild beasts than men. Fierce and animalistic, the barbarian tribe was a powerful force where every single member was a hardened warrior. They had spent years plundering food from the surrounding tribes, and a large portion of the Forest tribe's supplies had been stolen by them in the past. The shaman explained that they were followers of a demon, gaining dark power that allowed them to transform into beasts. They felt powerless to resist. Suddenly, it all clicked for Leo. That black bear from before must have been a warrior from the barbarian tribe. No wonder it was so mindless and savage. It also explained why that creature couldn't distinguish between the Garlic and Forest tribes, attacking the wrong target entirely. Leo looked toward the potted plant on his desk. The cactus, ever the loyal servant, immediately hopped out of its soil and stood at attention, ready for his god's command. Leo wondered if all demon followers could turn into beasts. The cactus replied that such a transformation was likely a specific demonic ability. Only a tiny minority among the followers, those known as heroes, could awaken this dark power and utilize it. That made sense. When the lightning struck the bear, it left a complete corpse because the creature was actually a hero among the demon worshippers, far stronger than an ordinary pixel person. Leo looked back at his own two hero brothers and wondered why they didn't have any special abilities. But upon opening the status panel, he realized he had been a bit too quick to judge. The fish-loving hero was already level 2. We see Finn's stats: Attack 2, Defense 1, Luck 2, and an Awakened Water-Seeking ability. At level 1, he can find water in any environment. Meanwhile, our pig-loving hero, Silas, has reached level 2 as a hunter. His stats are even more impressive, with an attack of 3 and a defense of 2. Most importantly, he has awakened a tracking ability, which, at level 1, allows him to identify traces left by any person or animal. It seems they were leveling up in secret all along. While these aren't combat skills, their utility is undeniable. With tracking, it's no wonder they spotted the barbarians. Leo realized he had judged them too harshly. He turned his gaze toward the western mountains, the home of the barbarian tribe. Having offended a god, they wouldn't find escape so easy. Leo immediately formulated a counterattack, sending the two heroes back into the mountains to scout. With their tracking and water-seeking skills, they were the perfect candidates for the job. Next, he opened the temple interface to look for a real advantage. He knew that a proper weapon could change everything for his people. A ranged weapon would free them from the dangers of close-quarters combat, allowing them to wear down the enemy from a safe distance. Even if it started as a child's toy, the mechanics were the same. He dragged a toy bow and arrow onto the screen to bestow it. A red and yellow bow icon appeared over the Garlic tribe. This was a divine gift, a powerful long-range weapon with significant reach. The game described it as one of the most vital tools for any army or hunter. The system asked if he wished to grant this gift to his followers. Leo clicked yes, and suddenly, exclamation marks popped up over the heads of everyone in the garlic tribe as they looked toward the heavens. The god had sent a new blessing, the bow and arrow. They marveled at this incredible weapon, realizing their lives were about to change. With this divine gift, they felt a new sense of courage. They would no longer have to live in fear of their enemies. The hunters reacted most strongly, dancing with joy as they quickly set about crafting their own bows from the divine design. They rushed into the forest with newfound excitement. Meanwhile, a question mark appeared over the prophet's head as he contemplated this gift. He realized the god intended to arm them so they would never be threatened again. It was a clear command to stand against the demon followers. They were meant to defeat those evil, savage brutes. The shaman, however, saw things differently, viewing the bow as a symbol of growth. The shaman explained that with a bow, which strikes like a frog's tongue, they could hunt from a safe distance. All they needed was the right equipment. With these arrows, they could hunt rabbits and monkeys, and even bring down birds from the sky. Even when facing vipers, bears, or wolves, they no longer had to fear being injured. They needed more bows. For now, every member of the tribe could be a warrior. A notification then popped up on the screen. It informed Leo that his divine gift had taught his followers how to craft and use bows. Naturally, their faith level increased as a result. Faith jumped by 30 points in one go, reaching a total of 267. Having mastered the bow, the garlic tribe was looking quite formidable and visibly more aggressive. The little pixel people began heading out with bows slung over their backs. Soon, the hunters started bringing back large prey like bears and deer, providing more leather. More hides were draped over the huts, and more dried meat hung from the wooden racks. Just then, word arrived from our two heroes. They had discovered a new tribe. This was the Rockpool tribe. They had heard our people possessed food and wished to trade. While the barbarians remained hidden, this was an unexpected discovery. Leo guided the two brothers back to the village. They returned with representatives from the Rockpool tribe, two little figures dressed in linen, clothes and carrying cloth bags. They looked quite wealthy, to be honest. Upon arrival, they immediately began trade negotiations with the prophet and the shaman. The Rockpool tribe had always traded with others, using salt to acquire food, clothing, and medicine. They hoped to trade their salt for Leo's wheat. A question mark appeared over the prophet's head. He saw this as a golden opportunity, a chance to spread the faith of his god to others. Leo felt quite gratified. The prophet truly understood his intentions. He asked the Rockpool friends if they had considered moving to a place better suited for survival. The Rockpool visitors looked at each other. They claimed the Rockpool was everything to them, and as long as they could trade, they needed nothing else. The shaman also tried to persuade them, noting that the barbarian tribe lived deep within the mountains. Since the barbarians worshipped the demon, they would attack any tribe that didn't share their faith. The Rockpool tribe would surely not be spared. However, smiling icons appeared over the Rockpool visitors' heads. They claimed this wasn't a problem, as they also worshipped that same demon lord. Exclamation marks instantly popped up over everyone in the Garlic tribe. The visitors explained that in the Rockpool temple, they enshrined 3 different deities, including the one the Garlic tribe viewed as a demon. They relied on the Rockpool and their wisdom to survive. As long as it led to a better life, they were willing to follow 1,000 different gods. The prophet and the shaman were momentarily stunned by this revelation. To be honest, this was quite a surprise. The Rockpool tribe was the first polytheistic group we've encountered, showing a practical streak reminiscent of early merchants. After a quick discussion, the leaders reached a consensus and agreed to trade, shifting the Rockpool tribe's status to neutral. As the two Rockpool visitors toured the village, exclamation marks suddenly appeared over their heads. They had discovered the garlic. Realizing they had found a unique spice, they raised their arms in excitement, begging for as much garlic as possible. They hailed the wonderful, spicy garlic as a treasure. Leo was amused to see his initial random choice finally paying off. In the early days of civilization, spices were an incredibly expensive luxury, while wheat and leather were common. Garlic was a unique commodity in this region. The visitors left 2 bags of salt and hurried home with their pungent prize. A few minutes later, a notification appeared. The Rockpool tribe had decided to make garlic their primary trade good. Their attitude shifted to friendly, and Leo's faith began to spread among them. His divine gift had left them overjoyed. This resulted in a significant boost to his faith, adding 120 points and bringing the total to a respectable 387. Leo was taken aback. The Rockpool tribe clearly wasn't ordinary if merely gaining distribution rights for garlic yielded such devotion. Their population and scale far exceeded the previous forest tribe. On second thought, their prosperity made perfect sense. To survive while juggling the worship of 3 different gods, they had to be formidable. They weren't just lucky. If they weren't strong, the barbarians would have crushed them long ago. Near midnight, the Garlic tribe faced a second raid. 25 barbarian warriors clad in animal skins charged from the western forest with stone axes. But this time, things were different. Our hunters had tightened their lines. Under the hero's command, they unleashed a hail of arrows that peppered the charging raiders. The barbarians seemingly had no experience fighting against bows, trying to tank the damage with nothing but hides and grit. By the time they reached the hunters, only 6 or 7 remained. With superior numbers and bows, the barbarians were wiped out. Aside from those killed or fled, the Garlic tribe captured 4 warriors. The prophet immediately began to interrogate them about their home. The captives remained defiant, shouting that they would never betray their demon god and calling our people heretics who deserve to die. When asked about their numbers, they stayed silent. However, our experienced shaman decided to try a different, more persuasive approach. He told them their bravery was recognized, but returning home in defeat would only lead to punishment from their demon and their tribe. He pointed out the village's abundance, plenty of wheat to fill their bellies, powerful bows, and of course, that delicious garlic. With dried meat and salt on the table, he suggested that joining the Garlic tribe wasn't betrayal, but a path to a greater god. Under divine protection, he promised the demon could no longer harm them. The 4 warriors fell into a thoughtful silence. Suddenly, exclamation marks appeared above their heads as they agreed to join. Our shaman certainly has a way with words, doesn't he? The new recruits quickly spilled everything. Their tribe lived in a massive cave to the northwest, totaling 82 people with 40 active warriors. Near the cave stood a statue of a god draped in animal skins called the Beast Slayer. Apparently, this deity had some rather specific demands. The Beast Slayer required live sacrifices and animal pelts, forcing the tribe to raid others for food. They even had 2 beast form heroes. One had vanished during the attack on the Forest tribe, while the other remained at home. To them, everyone else was just an enemy. They shouted the same slogans as before, but this time for the Garlic tribe. It was a remarkably smooth transition of loyalty, all things considered. The 4 barbarians traded their skins for leather vests and bows, blending in instantly. It seems this Beast Slayer wasn't much of a manager. He simply manipulated the barbarians to hunt and pillage for faith, showing no concern for their actual well-being. A poor strategy, to be honest. With our new archery advantage, the barbarian threat was minimized. Leo realized his priority remained gathering as much faith as possible. One can never have too many strategic reserves. After repelling the second raid, the Garlic tribe entered a welcome period of stability. The Rockpool tribe began sending frequent trade parties to purchase more garlic and weaponry. As their influence grew, the Garlic tribe's territory expanded, attracting even more immigrants to join their ranks. The population soon climbed to 247, and Leo watched his faith total rise to a very healthy 448. This rapid daily growth brought an old idea back to the forefront of his mind. It was time to check the temple's messenger. Converting an apostle requires 500 faith, and with only 52 points to go, Leo decided to wait it out using his magical items. With a steady growth of 2 points per hour, he thought he had a chance, but by 8:30 the next morning, it was time for work. His faith was stuck at 459, leaving him rather distracted all day as he looked forward to the weekend. The fatigue was starting to catch up with him, as the staff acted more like a temporary stimulant than a cure for exhaustion. It couldn't change human limits, and sleep remained a necessity, yet he couldn't stop wondering about the messenger in the temple. He debated if the investment was worth it, but considering even a laborer like Sophie was useful, a high-ranking apostle should be better. The most critical factor was that he had no other way to create an apostle. This was his only path forward for now. He finally made it to the end of the day, only for his boss to assign a last-minute task delivering concert tickets 20 kilometers away. By the time he returned home at 8 in the evening, he rushed to the computer, seeing his faith had reached 489. The growth was mostly from his items now, as population growth had slowed, so he took a quick shower to clear his head. He stood by the window, noting that the street light in the alley was empty tonight, which was a relief, to be honest. If people were hung there every other day, that demon player would be openly provoking the entire police force. He returned to the screen. The faith counter finally hit 501, allowing him to open the temple interface and click the icon to begin the conversion. A prompt appeared, asking if he wished to consume 500 faith to revive the apostle of the tranquil temple. He hovered his mouse over the yes button but paused, turning to ask his cactus companion, Sophie, for her opinion. He wondered if reviving a single apostle truly warranted such a massive amount of faith. An apostle is a god's strongest arm, she replied. She insisted it was worth it, though she admitted she didn't actually recognize this specific messenger or know his particular abilities. Leo asked if she knew any of the forest god's other followers. I remember Mr. Forest, the chief apostle, she offered helpfully. He was apparently powerful enough to summon forest spirits, but she hadn't met the others. Leo gave the cactus a rather skeptical look. It seemed she only knew one person after all. Great God, I was only a junior worker, Sophie added nervously. Sophie admitted she didn't recognize this specific one, explaining that different apostles possess different skills, some specializing in combat, while others excel in scouting. Regardless, she insisted an apostle was worth the cost, as Leo truly needed a champion to walk the world. He turned his gaze back to the screen. With a final click, he activated the Shield of Rest, and we see his faith counter drain instantly until only a single point remained. A prompt flickered across the pixelated world, announcing that the sleeping apostle had heard his call and that his faith had repaired the broken vessel. The soul, once withered, was now rapidly reviving from the sea of limbo. We watch as the ritual of resurrection begins to take hold. The apostle known as the Forest Sword, Luna, would now follow his will, enforcing his divine domain and fighting for the fire of his faith. As the dust of time settled, the image of a young girl wrapped in a black robe emerged. Luna's eyes were bound with a black cloth. Her seaweed green hair was tied back, her body regained its suppleness, and the cracks that once marred her cheeks vanished without a trace. She knelt on one knee within the temple, her long black robe trailing on the ground. Curiously, she didn't face the statue, but looked toward the screen. Deep down, Leo felt a chill as she offered her loyalty and faith to the great god above. His very first apostle had finally been born. The faith of the Garlic tribe grew even firmer with her arrival, as an apostle allowed his divine influence to be known by the wider world. The blessing was complete, and the bow and arrow merged into the world. It was a momentous occasion, to be perfectly honest. Leo's entire focus was now on Luna's personal status panel. She was a level 15 apostle, the legendary Forest Sword. Her stats were impressive: 20 attack, 20 defense, 30 knowledge, and 30 mana, along with 3 distinct abilities including wisdom. She possessed level 15 wisdom, level 5 limbo prayer, and level 1 forest sword. Wisdom, it seemed, acted as a prerequisite for her other skills. Essentially, it functioned as an ability accelerator. Limbo prayer, on the other hand, indicated that Luna was a specialized summoning necromancer. The Forest Sword was her ultimate move, allowing her to summon a holy blade in battle that massively boosted all of her combat attributes. After a fight, she could even create forest elementals, allowing her to build an elite army through constant warfare, a self-sustaining force, if you will. Her data was completely out of place compared to the Garlic tribe. It was like a high-level player had suddenly wandered into a starter village. Leo also noticed a dialogue box above Luna's head. There were no words inside, only a long, empty input line waiting for his command. Leo decided to test the interface, typing out a simple question: "Luna, can you see me?" As she remained kneeling, a new dialogue box appeared above her head. "Great God, Luna has heard your will," she replied. When he asked why her eyes were covered, she explained they had lost their life force. Apparently, they would occasionally fall from their sockets, so she bound them to avoid frightening others. This, we realize, is the true mark of an apostle. She was different from the other pixelated figures. She could actually converse with a player across the dimensional wall. Leo began typing away on his keyboard. He asked how the forest god she once followed had fallen. She explained that once the fire of faith vanished, all memories of the gods were erased with it. When asked about the fastest way to level up, she noted that while faith was the quickest method, it required a truly massive amount of divine energy. Typically, apostles gather faith by executing divine orders in the world, gaining experience through exploration, combat, and deep meditation. Leo did a quick calculation and realized that raising Luna to level 16 would require a staggering 1,500 points of faith. Compared to that, spending 500 points to obtain a level 15 apostle was an absolute bargain. To be honest, it was the deal of a lifetime. There was something magical about chatting with an apostle, reminiscent of that childhood excitement when talking to a stranger online for the first time. With a sense of anticipation, he asked how old she was. "Great God," she replied softly, "I can no longer remember my exact age." When asked her opinion of the Garlic tribe, she described them as a primitive group, low in population, uncivilized, and quite far behind the rest of the world. Then, Leo asked the ultimate question: "Can you come to my world?" She explained that she would appear in his temple, and if he sent her as a gift, she would return there. However, she pleaded with him not to do so. "Every gift and sacrifice is vital," she warned. "In the wars of faith between gods, every single opportunity to increase one's power is precious." The more fiercely his fire of faith burned, the better his chances of controlling the entire world. "Great God, what are you doing?" "Wait, just a moment." Before she could finish, Leo used his mouse to drag the flustered Luna directly into the sacrifice slot. A prompt asked if he wished to accept the forest sword, Luna. He clicked yes, and in an instant, the world before his eyes blurred. Suddenly, a slender girl wrapped in a black robe was kneeling right on his computer desk. Her eyes were veiled, and her pale face was tight with tension. Her small body trembled slightly as she whispered, "Great God, what would you have me do?" Her voice was a bit unusual, yet she spoke perfect English, her soft whispers carrying a strange, melodic accent. We can only wonder if this is some special linguistic talent of an apostle. Leo found the situation quite amusing. In the temple, Luna had seemed cold and sophisticated, but here in the real world, she looked like a lost, helpless girl. Leo spoke gently, explaining that he had summoned her for a serious reason. In this world, which she called the God Realm, demons were afoot. A dark player had already performed 3 demonic rituals nearby, and Leo needed her to track him down while ensuring his own safety. Upon hearing this, Luna's expression shifted to one of solemn resolve, and she immediately regained her composure. kneeling gracefully on the computer desk with her head bowed. She vowed to find the demon and protect her great god at all costs. When Leo asked if her powers still functioned here, she confirmed that abilities born from the fire of faith can transcend dimensional boundaries. That was a relief. He asked her to step down, and she hopped lightly off the desk, standing about 5'3". With porcelain-smooth skin, a delicate nose, and rosy lips, she appeared to be a young woman in her late teens. However, her hooded black robe and the cloth covering her eyes were far too conspicuous for a casual stroll in the city. If she didn't change, the demon would surely spot her first. From Leo's wardrobe, she picked out a white shirt and some jeans. She finished the look with a pair of simple slippers, trying her best to blend into this strange new world. Paired with her green hair, dark sunglasses, and a baseball cap, the oversized outfit actually gave her a rather trendy, street-style look. While the tribe's development was vital, Leo knew his safety in the real world had to come first. Luna was his primary shield. The more he learned about the simulator, the more he realized that the wars between gods were utterly ruthless. Fallen gods were a grim reminder of the stakes. If a demonic player found him, they would likely imprison him to farm his faith. The frequent, public rituals suggested that some players no longer cared for the law and were capable of any atrocity. While his neighbor Sophie was great at cleaning, she had no combat skills. With Luna by his side, he felt much more secure. The next day was Sunday. When Leo asked if she really had to come along, she insisted that a demon was watching him. She insisted on staying by his side at all times to ensure his safety, noting that while buying food was necessary, they had to minimize contact with any suspicious people. This was to prevent the demon from using food to poison him or perform a ritual. Her logic was sound, but Leo knew taking Luna out might bring a different kind of trouble. He decided to give her a simple backstory. Her name would remain Luna, and she would be a visitor from a small foreign country. Their families had known each other for years, so they had met as children, which explained why she spoke English so well. She was officially 18 years old. She was just in the city for a vacation, and in public, she was to call him Leo. If anyone asked a question she couldn't answer, she was simply to remain silent. With the preparations complete, we see them head out, their first stop being a shoe store. Luna's feet were quite small, so his own shoes were out of the question. At the mall, he had her try on some canvas shoes and offered to buy her some affordable clothes, though Luna insisted it wasn't necessary. Hearing her say those words with such a serious, earnest face made him feel a bit sympathetic toward her. Being an apostle on a constant mission wasn't easy, he realized. Moving to the grocery section, he stocked up on meat and potatoes, items that would last. He also grabbed rice and noodles, estimating they had enough food for half a month. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. It was an old acquaintance, Sophie, pushing a cart filled with hot pot ingredients alongside a male companion. Leo had no choice but to face the situation. He forced a greeting, asking if they were also shopping. Sophie introduced her boyfriend, or rather, her fiancé, a man named Mark. She introduced Leo as a handsome, kind colleague from her office. Mark was a tall man with tan skin, a square jaw, and a broad nose. He looked quite masculine and greeted Leo with a smile, before curiously asking for an introduction to the girl standing beside him. Leo introduced her as Luna, a friend. Sophie marveled at her, remarking that she looked like a porcelain doll, and asked how they knew each other. Leo maintained his composure, explaining their families were old friends. Luna remained silent, and Sophie's gaze lingered for only a moment before she decided to move on. She didn't want to disturb them, but Mark suddenly spoke up, asking if Leo lived in the dorms near the old motorcycle factory. He revealed he was a detective with the city police. He had been at the scene when the incident happened in the alleyway, though he was busy with the investigation. While he examined the scene, other colleagues had taken the statements. Leo nodded, realizing he was talking to a police officer. To be honest, that was a bit of a surprise. Sophie was surprised to hear that Leo was involved, but Mark explained that he had been one of the witnesses who reported the event at the time. Leo asked Mark if that pervert from the alley had been caught yet, but the detective admitted he couldn't reveal much, only that the suspect was still at large. It was a terrifying thought, knowing the victim would likely carry that trauma forever. Mark looked a bit awkward, bound by discipline, and could only promise they would bring the man to justice. After parting ways with Sophie and Mark, we see Leo and Luna carrying their heavy bags of groceries as they hail a taxi back to the apartment complex. He left the task of unpacking and organizing to the cactus girl, Ivy, while he sat down at his computer, eager to check the simulator once more. Luna sat beside him, watching as he clicked the mouse, and remarked softly that this must be how a lower dimension looks from the perspective of a higher one. It was easy enough to understand. From a great height, every person looks as small as an ant. It was simply a matter of perspective. Luna seemed lost in thought, sitting perfectly upright. On the surface, she appeared to be watching him play, but in reality, she remained incredibly alert. She was monitoring every sound in the small room. Leo then had a thought. If he could summon her, could he bring other tribe members here through the temple? Luna immediately urged him not to do so, explaining that such an action would be extremely dangerous for them. When a lower dimensional life form enters a higher dimension, they lack the fundamental basis and form required to exist there. Without the protective fire of a god's faith, the laws of reality would erase them, causing irreversible changes to their very being. Ultimately, they would devolve into grotesque monsters. Only apostles, who carry the spark of faith granted by their deity, can manage the transition. Even then, they can only stay in the higher dimension for a short time before the dimensional restrictions begin to take a toll. It seemed clear now that the real world was the higher dimension, while the pixel world was the lower one. Leo then pointed toward Ivy, who was busy in the background. He asked why Ivy was completely unaffected. Luna explained that the cactus girl was a special case, as she was originally born in the higher dimension. The deity had placed her into the lower dimension later, and being a very simple life form, she could adapt to many environments. Leo then asked how long Luna could stay. Her limit was about 15 days. She pleaded with him to ensure she returned to the lower dimension by then, or the laws of reality might twist her into something strange. She might even become a monster. Leo asked if it would be safe to summon her again after she returned, and she confirmed that there would be no issue. However, she would need to stay in the lower dimension for at least 3 days to allow her form to resynchronize with its foundation. Leo understood. It was a bit like recharging a battery or getting a vaccine. If Luna stayed here too long, she would mutate, but as long as she returned periodically, she would be fine. Returning home would allow her to maintain a stable form. With the preparations finished, Leo finally returned to the simulator, where the top corner displayed the population. The count stood at 254, with 21 points of faith. Growth within the Garlic tribe was much slower than he expected, though not for a lack of enthusiasm among the little people. Many babies were being born, but sadly, most did not survive to adulthood. In the early days, the survival rate for infants was less than 10%. Now it had risen to about 30%. Aside from the obvious lack of infrastructure, there was one major issue contributing to the high mortality rate. They were desperately short on doctors. The Garlic tribe's only medical professional was the shaman, who single-handedly covered the entire tribe's healthcare needs. The shaman was a level 2 hunter by trade, possessing a level 2 healing skill. And as we know, where there is new life, there is also the end of it. Injuries that wouldn't heal and the simple passage of time were the main causes of death. These pixelated little people were buried deep within the forest. They returned to the earth and nature, a custom from the old forest tribe that the new Garlic tribe had chosen to carry on. Once winter ended, it was quickly followed by an exceptionally scorching summer. The entire screen was bathed in a harsh, pale yellow light. Large patches of grassland withered and turned brown, and the river to the east began to recede. Every little person had steam rising from their heads. They were trapped in a state of extreme heat. Usually, they hid indoors, only venturing out at dawn or dusk to farm and hunt as the drought persisted. The people gathered around the temple once more to pray, begging their deity to grant them rain. If the heat continued, everything would be lost. The wheat and garlic would wither, and the people would surely follow. Leo didn't hesitate, spending 10 points of faith to trigger a miracle. We see the long-awaited rain finally falling upon the parched earth. The little people cheered and praised their god, but the prophet and shaman were worried. They discussed how the deity had sent rain to break the heat, but they couldn't simply rely on divine intervention forever. To be honest, they had a point. The heat would likely return, and they needed to use this rainy reprieve to find a long-term, reliable solution. The two wise men thought long and hard. When they couldn't find an answer, Leo guided them toward the riverbank. As the shaman moved back and forth along the water, a light bulb suddenly appeared over his head. He realized they could dig a trench in the ground to divert the river water toward their fields. It was a simple plan, but a brilliant one. This way, they could also store rainwater whenever it fell. The two leaders immediately called upon the entire tribe to begin the project. The pixelated people worked from dawn until dusk, bit by bit, beginning the arduous task of digging out the new irrigation canal. The water was diverted to the fields, flowing into a small pond before looping back to the river to keep the current fresh. On the screen, notifications began to flash. The Garlic tribe had learned the art of trenching, gaining a new understanding of irrigation and drainage. With these skills, their crop yields began to climb. As they mastered this new technology, the Garlic tribe's prestige grew among the neighboring tribes. The drought, however, showed no signs of relenting. But with the canals finished, basic drinking water and irrigation were finally secured, and our pixelated friends began to feel a sense of calm once more. Yet, in the midst of this long dry spell, the barbarian tribe returned for a third time. 32 warriors launched a desperate raid on the village. Excluding the elderly and the weak, this was essentially the entire tribe committing to a final, frantic robbery. They demanded water and food at any cost. They cursed the Garlic tribe as heretics, driven mad by the gnawing pains of hunger. But as the saying goes, you have to survive before you can thrive. The Garlic tribe was no longer afraid of a raid on this scale, and the hunters stood ready. With their bows in hand, they easily picked off the attackers. 12 barbarians fell in the skirmish, while the remaining 20 were quickly taken prisoner. Broken by the drought, the survivors had lost all will to fight. After a brief talk from the shaman, they surrendered immediately, eager to join the Garlic tribe. They shouted oaths of loyalty, claiming they would never betray their new home. To be honest, I suspect they had planned to defect all along. Perhaps they were simply too dim-witted to know how to ask for help properly, or maybe they were just struggling with a warrior's sense of pride. They explained that they had no food or water and that the demon demanded sacrifices. Even their heroes had been devoured by this dark master. They had resorted to raiding everywhere, and when that failed, they came here. This confirmed Leo's suspicion that the rival player was no elite strategist. To that player, the barbarians were mere tools, forced to hunt for sacrifices until even their greatest champions were discarded. It was a cold way to play. The barbarian tribe now existed in name only. Leo had planned to wipe out the remnants after the drought, but it seemed they couldn't even last that long. Under the indifferent weight of nature's power, survival is simply a matter of who can adapt the fastest, and our garlic tribe was winning. Relieved to have one less threat to worry about, Leo stretched his arms. Beside him, Sophie suddenly looked out the window, her voice turning grave. She whispered that she could sense a demonic aura. Leo walked to the window, but the alleyways and streets below were completely deserted. It was late, and with the rumors of a local creep wandering about, the only thing visible was a white stray dog. Sophie pointed toward a distant corner. There, a middle-aged man lay slumped against the curb, appearing completely drunk and surrounded by a mess of his own making, with a stray dog lingering nearby. The dog approached the man, sniffed him, and then did something entirely unexpected. It bit into his clothes and began dragging him toward a dark parking alley. Sophie turned to Leo, asking for the command to hunt this demon. Leo agreed, but he wondered how they would stay in contact while she was out there. She told him to use her eyes. Reaching toward her left socket, Sophie produced a white eyeball with a striking green pupil. It felt as cold as a gemstone and shimmered with a metallic luster, looking more like an ancient piece of art than a biological organ. She explained that by using the power of faith, everything she saw would be transmitted directly to him through this eye. Through this connection, Leo could witness the hunt and even issue new commands to her as the situation unfolded. He held the cold eye carefully, reminding her to stay safe and ensure that no one else discovered her true identity. With a respectful nod, Sophie was enveloped in a shroud of black mist before leaping from the window and vanishing into the night. As Leo gazed into the green pupil of the smooth eyeball, his vision shifted to a perspective entirely different from his quiet room. We see the streetlights blurring past as Sophie pursues her target at high speed, eventually turning into the narrow parking alley. Under the dim yellow lights, the stray dog's body began to swell and distort. It stood up on its hind legs as its fur split down the middle. A head of greasy, matted hair emerged, followed by a bearded mouth gasping for air and eyes filled with bloodlust. It looked like a human beast, and Leo realized with a shock that this was a high-definition version of the barbarian heroes from his game. The beast man tore the drunkard's clothes open, vomited a pool of blood onto him, and began tracing strange symbols with claw-like fingers. Suddenly, Sophie closed in like a streak of shadow, having scavenged a rusted steel pipe from somewhere nearby to use as a weapon. With a heavy metallic thud, she swung the pipe into the creature's temple, sending it crashing into the windshield of an abandoned car. Glass shattered everywhere, yet despite the impact, the creature's skull was only slightly dented as it struggled to sit back up. Sophie didn't give it a chance to recover. She brought the steel pipe down again and again, 1, 2, 3 times, with brutal efficiency. The beastman's arms finally went limp. It seemed that even a supernatural predator couldn't withstand Sophie's relentless assault for long. 垂下身体不动了，我看傻了，说好的召唤系亡灵法师呢？怎么是物理剑圣大人？这是一位恶魔信徒，身份应该是英雄宿业的声音从眼球里传来，我意识到真正的恶魔还在暗处，是的，他应该在某个地方窥视着，但因为戒为制约，我无法辨认神明的身份，只能识别恶魔使徒身上的信仰，或种难以确定恶魔方位。那个恶魔信徒还活着吗？活着，不过因为是从第一戒为破解过来。如此沦为怪物后，哪怕回到第一界为也无法恢复。杀死他们是对他们最后的仁慈，那就这样做吧。苏叶目光再次看向兽皮人大人，他已经死了。凹陷的汽车上只残留一个漆黑人影，仿佛烧焦后留下的人形灰烬。实在抱歉。大人，我太久没有战斗，虽然竭力赐我约束，但他实在太弱，这种程度的力量对他也足以致命，请责罚算了，反正结果也没区别。我忽然感觉视角剧烈摇 晃了一阵，接着不动了，就像画面被按下了暂停键。苏叶没有回应，他的身体陷入了某种静止状态，视角也变成固定朝下，朝着路灯方向，大概赛是那恶魔玩家动手了。我冷静观察思索对策，一个戴口罩的人走入视线里，都冒着避半张脸。终于逮到你了，你可让我找了好久，很会藏吗？那么你的信仰之火，我就先笑纳了。原本僵硬的苏叶忽然抱起一把，抓住对方手腕，抓住你了。对方浑身哆嗦，不可能，兽化仪式已经启动，你怎么可能还有理智？你是谁？苏叶通过眼球问我，大人是否要处死恶魔？这也是常规处理方法，不急。让我想拉开他的兜帽。苏叶扯下对方头套，露出一头淡金色头发和一副年轻的女性面孔。理发师安琪一脸呆若地看着苏叶，眼神有几分迷茫。现在问他，面对苏叶的询问，安琪回答得很爽快，也不知是清楚自己没有讨价还价的。Whether she felt she had no room to bargain or simply didn't care, we soon understood the situation. Angela had been posing as a victim to hide her identity. She had summoned a hero from the barbarian tribe into the real world to perform a bestial ritual, which involved stripping victims and hanging them up. The two targets of this ritual, the female college student and the delivery man, were actually simulator players themselves, not ordinary people. The key to the ritual was a small bestial relief embedded in the barbarian hero's forehead. If one stared at it for too long, the target would gradually lose their sanity, cognition, and memory. Suddenly, Angela looked quite indignant. Why is a high-level player like you still in the safe zone? She repeated her frustration, wondering why someone of his caliber was allowed to remain in the starting area while others were restricted. She complained that the committee members were bullies who only picked on ordinary players while turning a blind eye to the powerful ones. She demanded to know where the justice was. Following Leo's instructions, Silas remained silent, playing the part of a mysterious master. After all, the more one speaks, the more mistakes one makes. Angela wasn't surprised by his silence as she pulled 3 items from her pocket. She admitted that the winner takes all and that she had simply had the bad luck of running into a brick wall this time. This was all she had left. She explained that she had once reached the crawling zone, but a jerk destroyed her flag crown, forcing her back to the safe zone. She only wanted to use the ritual to make some quick cash in return. Now her barbarian tribe had collapsed due to a drought. She told him to do as he pleased, as the committee was already watching her anyway. Leo decided she should turn herself in and end this. Angela immediately took out her phone and dialed the police. Hello? I'm the psycho who's been hanging people up lately, she said quite casually. Yes, that's the one. I'm surrendering. I'm guilty. My name is Angela, and I live in the 9 Elements community, South Bank Apartments. She gave her full address, including Building 3, Room 701. Half an hour later, inside a white interrogation room, she began her statement. She insisted there was a high-level player who shouldn't be in the safe zone. Her flayer's aspect had absolutely no effect on him. She described how he had killed her rank 7 barbarian hero with just 3 strikes of a steel pipe. He was shrouded in a dark mist and looked young. She claimed he was either a high-level player from the crawling zone or a high-ranking apostle, far exceeding the standards of the safe zone. As she spoke, we see that Angela was sitting across from a wall made of solid green bricks. The surface of the wall rippled like flowing water, and a voice echoed from within. Angela, the committee is now announcing your sentence. For harming ordinary players in the safe zone, illegal robbery of faith, and disrupting social order, you have been found guilty. You are sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment until you enter the crawling zone. The punishment takes effect immediately. Suddenly, the room turned pitch black. Only the computer screen on the desk cast a faint glow, illuminating Angela's resentful face. She sighed and sat down before the monitor. She clicked the only icon on the desktop, the God Simulator. But as the interface opened, Angela slammed her fist onto the desk in a rage. She could accept being beaten by a high-level player, but a mere rookie dared to mock her after destroying her tribe and her portal. Back in our world, Silas held out his hands to present the spoils. Great one. These are the offerings from the demon's line, he said. Leo first picked up a pitch-black statue, about the size of a seal. It felt like a mass of soft, dark clay in his hand. The texture was somewhere between rubber and putty, and within the black mud, many eyes stared back with a gloomy, dark red light. It looked quite sinister. This was the effigy of the Flayer, a level 3 item that increases faith by 3 points per hour and adds 2 to attack. It can trigger a bestial ritual, stealing the sanity, cognition, and memory of a living sacrifice through a simple gaze. The victim then becomes a powerful flayer beast in exchange for faith. No wonder Angela said she was making quick cash. She was selling players to this mysterious entity. The effigy of the flayer is a truly peculiar item, as it functions through a form of conceptual attack rather than physical force. When those two players were attacked, they likely never imagined the real threat wasn't the Beastman or the Blood Curse, but this small statue. To be honest, it's quite rare to see a treasure with a level marker, meaning it has growth attributes and can be continuously upgraded. Leo set the statue down and picked up the next item. It was a whistle carved from an unknown bone, yellowed with age. This was the ancient evil whistle, which provides 2 points of faith per hour. It seemed to have been crafted by a master whistlemaker. By blowing it, one can control monsters and beasts that have lost their sanity. The description of its power was simple yet effective. Combining the effigy of the flayer with the ancient evil whistle is a classic case of 1 + 1 being greater than 2. The former turns people into beasts, while the latter tames those beasts for one's own use. It's no wonder Angela was so successful before. When Angela spoke of making people her dogs, she wasn't joking. She was simply stating a fact. We now look at the final item, a letter sealed with wax. With a gentle tear, the seal breaks to reveal 2 yellowed pages inside. This is the drifting correspondence, which provides 1 point of faith per hour. With 2 pages available, one can write a message and use a divine gift to send the letter to a specific individual in the lower realm. The recipient is guaranteed to understand the message. We recall that the letter found on the corpse during the Black Bear attack was a result of this very item. The barbarian tribe members were physically imposing but intellectually lacking, and their transformed heroes were even closer to mindless beasts. So, even though they could technically understand the letter, they still ended up attacking the wrong place. To be honest, it was a bit of a blunder. Leo considered the bestial ritual of the effigy. Its mechanics were the complete opposite of his own development strategy for the Garlic tribe. While it generates faith quickly, it essentially means working for the flayer and drawing unwanted attention, though it functions well as a stat-boosting accessory. He decided to give it to Silas, advising him to use it as an ornament and avoid the ritual if possible. Great one, Silas replied, accepting the gift. Leo then handed him the ancient evil whistle as well, since the 2 items were clearly designed to be used as a set. Silas could also burn them in the fire of faith to gain a burst of energy. Of the 3 trophies, Leo chose to keep only the drifting correspondence for himself. In Angela's hands, this item was useless because the barbarians lacked wisdom, but for Leo, it was a highly valuable consumable. With this, he could communicate directly with the prophet or the shaman instead of relying on indirect signs. He felt quite satisfied with this turn of events. First, he had flushed out the demon lurking in the shadows. He had watched as the authorities took Angela away, eliminating his greatest security risk. Even if she managed to escape through some trick, he now knew her true identity, while she remained completely in the dark about his. The tables had turned. He was now the one in the shadows, holding all the cards. Furthermore, he had gained 3 high-value trophies. The fixed income of 6 faith points per hour alone was enough to make him smile. Combined with his other items, his total reached 8 per hour. That totaled 192 points a day. In the past, he had to be frugal with his miracles, but now he could breathe a little easier. He could make it rain or strike down enemies whenever he pleased. However, before returning to the simulator, one key question remained for Silas. Silas, why didn't you use your abilities? Silas explained that his prayers consumed mana, which wasn't necessary against such a weak opponent. The opponent simply wasn't worthy of the forest sword. They were far too weak to even trigger its special effects. Leo felt a hint of regret as he returned the eye to Luna. She took the eyeball and skillfully tucked it back into the socket beneath her sunglasses. After that, he turned his attention back to the simulator. While he couldn't bring himself to personally kill a real person like Angela, he certainly had the nerve to deal with her barbarian tribe. He certainly had the nerve for a ruthless move, a lot of it, actually, and he figured that while Angela was still stuck at the station, he had a window to act. He opened the Miracles tab and selected Earthquake. It required 40 faith points, but he only had 20 at the moment, not quite enough for a disaster. Since speed is of the essence and delays are dangerous, he grabbed a pen and wrote a message on the drifting correspondence. The demon the barbarians worship has been defeated. Do not miss this chance. Conquer and absorb the barbarian tribe immediately to eliminate the threat. He then placed the letter on his mouse. A prompt appeared asking if he wished to bestow the drifting correspondence upon his followers. He clicked yes. Unlike before, this time the little pixel people didn't realize a divine gift was descending. The letter drifted through the air after entering the pixel world, and we see Leo click and drag it directly onto Sarah. An exclamation mark popped up over Sarah's head, a divine revelation. The demon of the barbarian tribe had been crushed. Sarah and the shaman took action immediately, and the Garlic tribe dispatched 30 elite hunters. Led by 2 heroes, the group charged into the mountains and quickly located the barbarian tribe's settlement. It was a small camp nestled in the peaks, with only about 20 people left, all lying on the ground in a semi-conscious state. Above their heads, floated gray ghosts, indicating they were extremely weak. Even if the garlic tribe hadn't attacked, they wouldn't have lasted more than a few days. Our two heroes easily took all the barbarians captive and then, without a moment's hesitation, destroyed the demonic statue near the cave entrance. The garlic tribe and the barbarian tribe successfully merged, causing their faith to surge. His faith points increased by 51, bringing the total to 71. Leo looked at the cave next to the old barbarian site. It looked suspicious, but he wasn't about to let his people take any risks. He opened the earthquake miracle and selected the cave entrance and the surrounding area. 40 faith points were consumed as the mountains shook and boulders tumbled down, causing the entrance to rapidly collapse. Debris completely buried the vicinity. This way, if anything strange happened within the collapsed cave, he would be the first to notice. A prompt appeared on the screen. The Flayer's faith has completely vanished from this area. His followers will now begin searching for a new god. The days of endless commuting and work never seemed to stop. As Leo sat at his desk organizing files, his colleague Sarah leaned in with a curious look. She mentioned how Luna, who looked like a refined young lady, seemed almost like a doll. She asked which wealthy family she belonged to and when they planned to marry. Leo nearly spat out his water in shock, insisting they were just friends. Sarah didn't buy it, noting the girl was wearing his clothes while they shopped together. She joked that if she wasn't his girlfriend, she must be his maid. To be honest, Leo really wanted to tell her that she wasn't entirely wrong about that. But how could he explain? Sarah wouldn't let it go, so he quickly changed the subject, asking about her fiancé, Officer Mark. He asked how tall he was, 6'2", apparently, and if a tall man provided a sense of security. Then, he brought up the news about that local maniac. Sarah confirmed they caught the person, but the suspect's identity was sensitive and hadn't been made public. The case had already been handed over to higher authorities. Mark hadn't revealed much, citing departmental discipline. Deep down, Leo felt a jolt of surprise. Handed over to higher authorities? That meant something specific. It meant Angela's identity as a player had likely been exposed. More importantly, it seemed there was a special department managing the player community. This suggested that besides him and Angela, there were many others acting as deities in the pixel world. It was a sobering thought, really. He recalled how Angela mistook Luna for a high-level player and mentioned a committee. It seemed that organization was definitely involved behind the scenes. Still, this confirmed Angela was indeed under arrest. For the time being, she wouldn't have much of a chance to cause any more trouble for him. Sarah shifted the focus back to him, noting Luna looked barely 20. She wondered which country she was from and why her family trusted him so much. It seems she trusts him completely. One might wonder if they were promised to each other as children, but she has already headed home. Sarah was shocked he let her leave, worried she might never return. After all, where else could he find someone with that kind of beauty? But everyone must go home eventually. Luna had returned to the pixel world, a rule she had to follow regardless of her personal wishes. The longer she stayed in the real world, the more likely she was to mutate. With Angela captured, there was no longer any reason for her to stay here. An apostle's greatest mission is to serve as the deity's arm and spread faith. She could only truly use her talents back in the pixel world. In fact, Luna had only stayed on this side for 2 days. When Leo returned home after work, he found the nightshade plant sitting quietly in its pot. It looked no different from a normal indoor plant. On the game screen, the garlic tribe was growing steadily, with the population now reaching 303. With 20 points of faith remaining, we see Luna in the temple, dressed in her black robes and kneeling quietly as she awaits her deity's command. Leo typed into the dialogue box, asking if there had been any anomalies in the tribe. She replied that everything was normal and there was nothing unusual. He then asked if she had found anything regarding the collapsed cave in the barbarian tribe. She reported that it was a passage leading into another area. However, because the mountain had collapsed, the path was completely destroyed and unusable. Luna then made a humble request of her own. She asked for permission to temporarily leave the tribe. Recently, she had used a prayer to awaken a soul who spoke of an oasis in the southern desert. In that oasis lived the Bedouin tribe, a people who raised sheep and camels. They were a nomadic group, wandering through the shifting sands. More importantly, they controlled a passage to another plane. Luna wanted to enter the desert, find them, and bring them into the fold. She intended to turn them into his believers. Having full confidence in her strength, Leo gave his blessing, and she set off immediately. We watch as Luna leaves the temple and heads into the western desert to begin her exploration. Meanwhile, Leo looks over at the cactus on his desk. He asked Ivy, the little cactus spirit, to cook him a bowl of noodles, specifically the kind with pickled peppers. He requested an extra egg and a ham sausage as well. Ivy stood up from her flower pot, ready to serve her great deity. She shook the soil off her body, found a bag of instant noodles in a cardboard box, and ran off to cook. Leo, it turns out, lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. He shares the lease with his college friend, Jason, though Jason doesn't actually live there. The second room serves as a temporary warehouse for boxes. Jason usually comes by early Monday mornings to move stock. Since Leo keeps the door deadbolt, he isn't worried about anyone seeing little Ivy. Outside, the cries of stray cats drifted in. Perhaps they were fighting, or perhaps they were on a date. Leo stood up to stretch his stiff limbs. As he twisted his neck, his joints let out a series of loud cracks. He moved a bit too suddenly, however, and managed to strain his lower back. While he was rubbing his sore back, a new notification appeared on the screen. The Garlic tribe had finally invented a writing system. This breakthrough slightly increased everyone's intelligence. With the ability to keep records, they could now spread their civilization and faith across the lands. If his back didn't hurt so much, Leo felt like he could have performed a victory dance. The tribe was finally moving past its primitive era. With the appearance of writing, the game interface updated as well. At the top of the screen, new resource displays appeared, including a counter for food. New icons for wood, stone, leather, and salt appeared, though they didn't show exact numbers, looking more like battery bars instead. The food supply was a healthy green, and hovering the mouse revealed a detailed list showing wheat made up 80% of it. Meat accounted for 10%, while salt and leather were also in the green. However, wood was yellow and stone was a critical red. It didn't take Leo long to realize that these resources could only be tracked now that writing had finally been invented. As civilization advances and social complexity increases, the interface updates accordingly, a natural progression, one might say. Fortunately, the civilization evolves on its own, so Leo doesn't need to micromanage every detail, only guide the overall direction. The game notifications continued, noting that since he defeated the god Beast Slayer, the Salt Pool tribe's attitude had become friendly. The Salt Pool tribe even offered him a tribute, a word that, naturally, caught his attention and piqued his curiosity. Feeling a surge of excitement, he opened the temple to find a glittering golden item in the tribute slot, the golden dice. Each roll costs 2 faith points, and rolling a 6 grants a tribute of unknown origin. Suddenly, his excitement began to fade. The Salt Pool tribe had essentially offered him a gambling tool, and Leo had become quite protective of his precious faith points. Looking at the description of the golden dice, one phrase came to mind: trouble is brewing. After all, gambling is often just a scam. He wondered where those 2 faith points actually went, especially considering the merchant-like nature of the Salt Pool tribe. He suspected a hidden deity was behind the golden dice, using the Salt Pool tribe to run a scam across the lands. Defrauding other gods of their faith deposits was certainly more clever than the crude robberies favored by someone like Angela. As for the odds of rolling a 6, they seemed entirely rigged. It was a blatant case of behind-the-scenes manipulation. Einstein once said that God does not play dice, but since it was a gift, Leo saw no reason not to accept it. Luna had mentioned that unwanted tributes could be tossed into the fire of faith to be converted back into raw energy. He dropped the golden dice into the temple bonfire, confirming that it really wasn't worth much. He then turned to the tribe's geography. The base was on the cross plains with plenty of undeveloped land, stretching north to the forest and east toward the river. To the west lay mountains, and to the south a desert. Though the world map continued to expand through exploration, no other settlements were nearby. We know that for rapid growth, trading and merging with other tribes is the best way, yet the only safe passage currently available is the Salt Pool tribe behind the mountains, who firmly control the imports and exports. Another potential path leads to the Bedouin tribe in the southern oasis. Leo realized that establishing a connection with Jacob and the others there would still take time. Unlike the aggressive barbarians, the Salt Pool tribe was more flexible. They were actively trading, and with no immediate conflict of interest, the situation remained stable. But after the Garlic tribe invented writing, another change occurred. The pixelated little people had all learned to think for themselves. Those little question marks were no longer the exclusive privilege of the prophet and shaman. Leo clicked on the question marks to read their thoughts. One person wondered why they felt hungry every morning, even after eating the night before. If they were always going to be hungry again, they mused, did eating actually have any meaning? Meanwhile, in the fields, the weeds were outgrowing the wheat. Another villager wished that wheat could grow as effortlessly as weeds. Imagine a world where food was so abundant it could never be finished. A third thought about how meat, wheat, and garlic were all delicious, but they were truly at their best when eaten together. He felt certain he was the only one who knew that secret. Elsewhere, a youth worried about whether to succeed the aging prophet or the shaman. It was quite a headache for the poor lad. However, the thoughts of one particular farmer soon caught Leo's attention. With weeds and pests everywhere and a drought looming, the wheat harvest looked grim, and the entire tribe was depending on that wheat. If the harvest failed, they would starve come winter. He wasn't alone. Several other farmers expressed the same deep-seated anxiety. As professionals who managed the fields, they were highly sensitive to the environment. After a quick search, Leo decided on his next divine gift. He went to his kitchen, grabbed a large potato, and placed it over the mouse. The game asked if he wished to bestow the potato upon his followers. He clicked yes, and exclamation marks immediately popped up over the villagers' heads as they realized their god had sent another blessing. A potato that grows buried in the soil is drought-resistant and far more productive than wheat, a completely new type of food for them. Smiling faces appeared over the farmers' heads. They believed Leo knew the harvest would be poor and had provided the potato so no one would starve. Praising their god, the farmers quickly planted the potatoes in new fields. As the dry season passed, a few rains finally began to fall. Autumn didn't last long before the snow began to fall, and just as the farmers predicted, the wheat harvest was poor, dropping from 80% to a mere 40%. Potatoes filled 30% of the gap, while meat covered 20%, leaving the overall food reserves flashing a warning yellow. Fortunately, the potatoes were harvested just in time. Otherwise, the winter food shortage would have been severe. And this, we see, is one of the perks of a progressing civilization. As people learn to think, worry, and observe, they engage in more communication and experimentation. As the deity behind the scenes, Leo could see the subtle changes in this pixelated world through the villagers' doubts, allowing him to make targeted adjustments. During this relatively short winter, two significant things happened. First, the Salt Pool tribe arrived to buy a large batch of grain at a high price. They reported that due to the prolonged drought, most other tribes they encountered were facing famine. Our garlic tribe was now considered a wealthy area. The second event was the arrival of 22 immigrants from the Salt Pool tribe, including 2 carpenters, 2 pharmacists, and a salt worker. For the first time in history, the garlic tribe had attracted a group of skilled professionals. They were already familiar with the faith of the great god, and with the famine looming, no place offered a better chance of survival than a food-producing hub. The carpenters, skilled in logging and woodworking, headed into the forest that winter to build the garlic tribe's very first wooden house. The pharmacists filled the gap where only the shaman knew medicine, venturing into the woods to gather herbs and save many lives. The salt worker even found some salt in the western mountains. Though the yield was low, it provided the tribe with an alternative source of the precious mineral. Leo poured himself a cold soda, opened a bag of cucumber-flavored chips, and looked down at his busy little pixelated people. He felt as though he were becoming one with them, his own body feeling more energized. He wasn't looking for chaos or drama. All he wanted was this steady, quiet sense of happiness for his tribe. And so, the story of their survival continues to unfold before our eyes. We watch as the small settlement grows stronger with every passing season. It is a testament to what a little divine intervention and a lot of hard work can achieve. But for now, we leave our villagers to enjoy the fruits of their labor in the snow. And so, we take a brief moment to appreciate the journey so far with the Yo-Yo television series exclusive. Our story will continue shortly, brought to you by the Yo-Yo television series exclusive. Stay with us as we follow the Garlic Tribe's progress on this Yo-Yo television series exclusive.